leader. You're an inspiration to many. And we're at a critical time in this thing called life. We have climate change, we have peak oil, we have a big crunch coming that is going to affect us all. And I think we kind of get caught up in the battles about what's not working, and we get caught in the struggles, and they're important. But we also have to redefine a future. We have to create a new vision for the world. Occupy Wall Street, the collapse of the economic order as we know it. It's time to rebuild something different. And as my kind of final question for you, I just would like to kind of kick off the idea of alternatives and how we build them. Where do we go from here?
I think the first place we build alternatives is in our minds and in our hearts. Because our minds have been colonized. And the minute you can free your mind, all kinds of possibilities open up. If you're colonized to imagine that the only way to farm is with chemicals, you'll keep farming chemically. But the minute you realize working with nature, working with ecological processes, doing organic farming is better for the soil, better for the farmer, better for the eater, suddenly a whole new set of options get created. I think the second thing is to recognize the interrelatedness of the multiple crises. Whether it's the ecological crisis, including species extinction and climate change, or it's the economic crisis, and after 2008, no one can pretend that it isn't there. And the third, I think, is a deep political crisis, a crisis of democracy. Because when we started the International Forum on Globalization to deal with the WTO, we defined the process of globalization as the establishment of corporate rule. We could see that what this process was doing, it was in the name of free trade, it was made to look like it's about trade, but it was really about who starts to control production and consumption and the natural wealth of this planet. I think in 2012, everyone in Occupy, the Indignados in Spain, everyone is so clear that representative democracy has been hijacked by corporate interests. And today the state is not acting on our behalf, even though representatives come and get votes. And at the end of it, they don't get instruction from people, they get instruction from the corporations. And this divide, this separation between the will of the people and the will of the corporations is becoming a deep threat to democracy. If we sit back and watch it unfold, there's only one next step, which is a totalitarian state. Using instruments of fear, of violence, of control, of defining all actions of a democratic society as extremist. It's happening.
You're one. You're a radical. They've said in Canada that, environmental
and
radicals.
the other is to recognize what our fundamental freedoms are and to start to correct these aberrations. To correct them in our collective strength, to correct them with a different kind of vision. And I've tried to articulate this other vision in terms of what I call earth democracy. And it's not sort of, a worldview out there, but it's connected to everyday actions of people. And I call it earth democracy because I do think the next step of human freedom will only come out of a larger freedom for all life on earth. It's only when we set all species free will the last human being be free. And so earth democracy is about the democracy of life. But it's also a democracy of everyday living. It's not about that ballot paper once in 4 to 5 years, because we know it's not making a difference anymore. It is about how we grow our food, how we eat it, how we run our educational systems, what happens to our water, whether it gets poisoned and fracked away and becomes one continuum with oil and gas, or our rivers flow free, our streams and groundwater and aquifers are able to sustain life. And that everyday action, I think, is the most powerful action. That's where, again, I go back to the spinning wheel. And when Gandhi was asked, how can a few pieces of wood bring you freedom? And he said, these pieces of wood bring us freedom because they're so small. Anyone, in those days, you could still make your own spinning wheel, you know, set it all up. This is so small that it can be in the hands of the poorest woman in the smallest hut, so that the last person is relevant to creating freedom for India. And one of the big things we are told, I remember an environmental debate, and it's an environmental expert is saying, because the problems are so big, we can only solve them through large responses, and therefore only the corporations can solve environmental problems. And I said, precisely because the problems are so big, we have to respond to them at the level of the small, because only the small can multiply enough to be able to deal with the big challenges we have. And that is what I call living democracy. A democracy that's vibrant, where we reclaim the spaces that are the rightful spaces, but not only as rights, but also as our responsibilities and duties. And this then gets connected to creating living economies. That's what has been such a pleasure for me in terms of my travel through Nova Scotia and today here in New Brunswick, because there's such a burst of energy here, that people are trying to define living economies in new ways. And it's through these initiatives, with a deep awareness of what is the ugly vision of total control that we face, we anticipate, to have one eye on resisting that, but our heart, our mind, our bodies, ourselves, our communities, dedicated to building the alternative.